Thomas Green here with Ethical Marketing Service. On the episode today, we have Alicia Farricielli. Alicia, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on here.
It is very much my pleasure. Would you like to take a moment and tell the audience a bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, so I call myself an inner child coach or specialist. So I work with people to take them back a little bit to their childhood, figure out the little wounds that happened, connect them to their what we call the inner child, and then move them forward in their business and their personal relationships and their life. And I do that kind of on a spiritual basis. We do that through one-on-one coaching, meditation, breath work, energy work, and all kinds of fun modalities like that.
Okay. It's a very interesting topic. I am intrigued. Um, who would benefit from doing from being a client of yours?
I want to say everyone because it's true. We all have things in our past. And so even if we had a really good childhood growing up, there's still things that were called wounds that could have happened to us. So for instance, if you were in say, in your business and you are having issues with not getting to the next level in your business, or you don't feel the self-worth behind your business, you don't think you can do that in your within your business. If you're constantly hiring, firing on people over and over and over again, a lot of times it could be tied into something, an inner child wound. If you're in your personal relationships, if you're having issues with your spouse over and over, just repeated cycles, if you're having a hard time staying in a relationship, or if you feel like you're codependent on someone, a lot of times that can go into inner child wound. So it's really any area of your life that you don't feel 100% fulfilled can to be tied into an inner child wound.
Okay. Well, I can certainly see from your description how many people would benefit from doing that work.
Yeah.
You mentioned the wounds. Are there some typical examples that you will get from people who they have those wounds? What's a good example of, let's say, the top three or four of them, maybe?
Yeah. So wounds are a lot of times people pleasing are is caused by the wounds. A lot of times I'm finding people who are just don't feel like they're confident enough in themselves. They don't feel self like enough worth in their value in their life. I find that to be a big thing. A lot of times these wounds, and I go back to preference, a lot of these wounds are imagine yourself when you were 3 or 4, 5, or 6 years old, and you maybe had a child or a kid in school that called you ugly or didn't want to be your friend anymore or did something. That's a wound that could happen. A lot of times we have, childhood things in school that happen to us. And I'm not talking about major bullying. Of course, that is a wound, but that can be more on a larger trauma scale. Imagine your parents told you that you were um, not good enough. I mean, that you needed to keep enough grades up to be, to be good enough. Or maybe it's the opposite. Your parents were kind of neglectful. They didn't really care about you, your education. So it could be to the extremities of different things as well. Those are kind of the common things I find. I find a lot of times adults, as we get older and older, we still want to start to please our parents, try to please our bosses. We're trying to please our friends. We're trying to please society. That is a really big key characteristic to an inner child wound that I see a lot of that play in.
Okay. So, people pleasing is a good one. So let's say someone comes to you, they say, I'm a serial people pleaser. What do you say to them?
I used to be you. No. um, yeah, I mean, it really goes back to think about the reasonings behind you're trying to please people. It's usually not a genuine response. We're not trying to please them on a genuine response of to make them happy, but it's almost a personal level that we're trying to make them happy for, to make us feel good about ourselves. So let's go back deep and it's like, when were the first time you felt like you had to make someone feel happy all the time? Or you had to calm the peace and what type of environment did you grow up in? So when you find people that grew up in multiple different environments, and they could be to the different extremities, a lot of times that's where the people pleasing comes from. So we want to identify where the first time you felt that way. And they want to connect with your inner child. So your inner child is something that doesn't never goes away. It's always there. And it can either be a wounded inner child, or we can make it into a very peaceful, playful, creative portion of ourselves. So we're going to go into look at this child, and you can do this by looking at a piece of paper or a picture of yourself. Imagine when you were, younger, and you can talk to this inner child. Like, what were you missing? Maybe it was mom made me feel like I had to always do the dishes in order to get a treat, something like this. Or I had to always have a clean room before I left my house, which could be a small wound. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Or I had to always bring out home straight A's. It could be an A minus, it had to be an A plus. Things like that happened throughout our childhood. Um, just talk to your inner child. Ask them, what was it that your child needed at that moment? And so then we're going to go back and we're going to acknowledge the feeling of that inner child. We're not going to say, well, it's okay, you shouldn't feel this way and just shove it down as we kind of been told. We're going to be, oh, it's okay that you feel this way and you are validated in your feelings and it's okay. You're going to be okay. And I want to, and then sit and listen to your inner child and just let them kind of relax into it. Let them talk about there's kind of an inner dialogue you're going to have going on here and whatever pops up. And so then we're going to let our inner child know we're safe and it's secure and it's okay for it to come out of this little box that has been put into. And it's okay. It's going to be fine because we're now reparenting this inner child. So once we get through to the inner child portion and we're going to start to reparent it, we're going to spend daily stuff on it. We're going to look at pictures of ourselves. We're going to look in the mirror and comfort our inner child and pretend our inner child is right here in our heart center. We're going to go into this heart center and we're going to tell it that you're safe, you're loved, you're protected. Everything there's nothing wrong with you. You are perfectly fine the way that you are. And we're going to kind of rewire the things subconsciously in your brain that's telling you the inner child's going, well, I'm not safe, I'm not loved, and it keeps on acting out. We're gonna every time it does that, we're gonna come back in and we're gonna give it some peace and some love. And as we do that, the inner child's gonna blossom and it's gonna turn into this creative portion of yourself. And when it gets to this creative portion of yourself, we're gonna find the things that you want to do when you're a child. Did you like basketball? Did you want to be Superman? Did you want to be a ballerina? Did you want to be, what did you want to be at that time? What did you enjoy? Until you got older and decided that you were no longer deserving of that or you were too adult to be a child. And so we're going to take little aspects of that. I always say, you probably can't put on a Superman cape and run around the streets. If you want to, by all means, I love that. Send me a video, please, because I want to see this. But if you're not comfortable doing that, then put on a red shirt and just pretend that day you're Superman. And what are the characteristics of Superman? They're confident, he's strong. Be that person. Be that part, the parts of Superman that you loved. And that's just an example. If you like basketball, go out and play basketball, play hoops with your friends. Get into the childlike characteristics and things that you love to do. That's going to bring that joy out and stay connected with that inner child. I know that was a lot for your question, but
No, I like the answer. And I'm fond of the concept of reparenting. If you're missing something, then you
yeah.
give that to yourself. I don't know a lot about it, so I just have kind of additional questions about it.
Yeah.
One of those is I don't know why this comes to me, but I like the exercise that you laid out. But I'm wondering, at what point do you know if you're sort of done with it? Is there a point where you become done, or is it an ongoing process?
So it's probably going to be an ongoing process because there's going to be things that still trigger it because it's still subconsciously and consciously in our mind because your mind doesn't forget things. We can forgive things, but we don't forget them. So there's going to be things that maybe your partner or spouse or your boss or a client or somebody tells you, it says it in a certain tone of voice that just triggers it. But you're going to be able to very quickly go back and be like, that's my inner child. And you just go back really quickly and calm your inner child down. So the inner child is never going to leave you. It's always with you inside of you. We want to keep it happy and free and joyful. So you're always going to be pulling back layers. And so people think, oh, I'm going to do this one time, or I'm going to do this for a year, and I'm going to be completely healed. Yes, you're going to be healed to a certain point, but we're human beings. We'll walk outside the door and something is going to set us off, or we have experiences that we're always tying things to other experiences in our past or these wounds. So yes, you're going to always be reparenting your inner child, but it's going to come much quicker and it's not going to have to go through the exact same process until you figure out maybe your inner child had another wound. And still, once you start going through the process and getting through the stages, it's not going to be as scary because you're gonna be like, well, I did this one time. Okay, I'll call her little Alicia. She's acting out again. She feels insecure. I need to give her little Alicia a little bit of attention today. So I'll just sit down and I'll just go. I meditate through this, but there's multiple other ways you can. I'll just go in and meditate and talk to her, and she's fine. Usually takes me 5 minutes, maybe at the max, because I'm acknowledging her feelings. And that's the biggest portion of it. Is if we say, oh, it's went away, we're still not acknowledging the feelings. We always need to acknowledge feelings. Imagine a 3-year. I mean, if you ignore a 3-year-old, what's it gonna do? It's gonna continue to act out because it needs your attention. It needs something. So it's either gonna it can pout, that's still acting out, and that's kind of going back in our subconsciously pouting the whole time, and it's gonna come out again, or it's gonna scream at you and yell at you, and it's gonna come out in anger. It just doesn't go away. So it's always there with us. We just have to acknowledge it, and again, acknowledge its feelings and reparent it.
Well, I am, I would say, quite an authority on the 3-year-old. So I've had that experience for the last year, so I can tell you that ignoring is not in the picture. So it's like I've heard it said that be kind to me or don't be kind to me, but don't ignore me. That's not kind of allowed. So
Yeah.
if we're applying that to ourselves, I would imagine ignoring the feeling is kind of like the worst thing you can do. You mentioned that you meditate through that process. What does that look like?
It's just going in and having a conversation. So when I do meditation, I do it on a very spiritual level where I connect to God, divine, and kind of have conversations that way. But talking to my inner child's a different thing. I go in and I really get deep inside myself and like, where is this inner child even feeling and on my body part? Sometimes it's feeling in my shoulder, and I almost talk to the little child on my shoulder here, and I'll be like, and hold it and just give it some extra attention and love. And then I start asking questions like I would talk to a normal child. How are you feeling? Well, I'm mad. I'm angry. Okay, well, what are you angry about? And then I'll listen. And then sometimes, sometimes kids don't give you the right answer. Well, I'm angry. I'm just angry at you. Well, what did I do to make you angry? Or what did you have to kind of layer these questions in and really just keep asking questions and questions and questions and questions until you get to the final answer. And so it's just a process of acting like you're talking to a version of you that was 3 years old or 4 or 5 years old, whatever age you want to define that at. And so just having those conversations, you don't have to go into meditation. You can sit in the mirror, you can sit, which is kind of same thing, and have those conversations with your inner child. So yes, you are almost talking to yourself. And so it can feel a little odd and a little weird at times. But once you do that, it opens up and it gets easier and easier every time. You don't feel quite as weird. Now, I wouldn't recommend going and having conversations out loud in front of other people that might think that's a little crazy. But you in a quiet space, a safe space, wherever you feel the most safe, because your inner child's not going to come. If you don't feel safe and you have distractions going around, more than likely that inner child's not going to feel safe either. So you want to feel like in the most safe place you can to have these conversations.
When we first started talking about it, I was in my head, I was thinking of some sort of assessment. It's kind of like where do I fall? I don't know, fall short is not the right language, but some of the wounds that you referred to, I was thinking, do I have self-worth issues? And all the various different things that you spoke about, and putting it down on a piece of paper, and this is what I need to work on. Do you follow that type of, I've used assessment, you might use a different label for it, or are you being mindful of your emotions and having that dialogue?
Becoming more mindful of my emotions and how it shows up in my day-to-day life. So I actually, kind of going through, I did a deep inner meditation today on a personal level. I was like, what is kind of something that's kind of keeping me blocked from feeling a certain way about portions of my business, that I can't have fun in my business and make money at the same time, which I know consciously is not true. But it's like, I think I still have that little portions of myself from society, from my upbringing, that says you have to work hard to make stuff happen. You have to work hard, and in working hard means it's not fun, which is complete opposite of what it should be. And I know that, and I've worked enough on myself to know that that's not true. But I'm like, where is this coming from? So I get into my meditation and I'm asking, and this was actually guided meditation that I'd found online. And I was kind of throughout this, I was asking questions like, where's this coming from? Where's this coming from? And just reading from a family friend of my family's that I noticed not treating one of my parents right and feeling more authoritative over them. And that was trickling down through to myself, to my family, to myself. And when I saw that as a small child, Of course, when you see your parent not being, treated the way that they should be and respected the way they should be, you're tying that into yourself. And so it's kind of like when you talk bad about the other parent, the child takes it personal, you know, that type of thing. So that kind of went into that. So I had to go and talk to my inner child, and then say, you know what, that was not true at the time. It was the feeling that was not right, and it was not true that my parent was any less than this other parent, or this other person was, and it didn't make me any less. So once I'm feeling that less, and that's kind of where it came, the root came from. And so that might seem kind of wild to some people, like, how did you tie that into? But I went through the questioning process and it led to that. That's where that little piece of unworthiness that was locked inside of me was. And I was able to release a lot of that. That actually happened this morning. So to answer your question before, no, it's an ongoing process. And there are things that I come across, something that I find out, or ways that I react and initially react to things, or I'm not happy about. I'm not saying I'm a horrible and bad or wrong on it. Just something that doesn't feel good inside of myself that I want to work on. I want to know where it's coming from so I can heal it. But people can sit down and can make a list out too. And some of my clients, I do too. I'm like, it depends on, they're more logical thinkers and they need to have the list down of what do I want to work on. Or if it's something just pops up, it's kind of both. Just depends on your personality and the way that you work better. But it all
Okay.
goes back to
So
feeling.
yeah, so that analysis can be done, or if that's not you, then it doesn't have to be done. But the process of, let's say, healing or getting through that stuck feeling that you have, it would be the conversation with the inner child.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And have you had any instances where I don't know, a bit of conflict around it? So you've gone through the process and perhaps there's something that hasn't worked for you?
Not really. There's not really, I'd say not work for me is if I'm not being completely honest with myself and I'm approaching it at an angle that is more, if I'm approaching it from an angle of not service to myself, I'm approaching it from a people pleasing angle, I guess is what I'm kind of saying. The way that I'm approaching this, it may not work. But if I'm approaching it from wholeheartedness that I want to heal inside of myself, and I'm willing to do whatever it is, and I want to know what it is. I want to know what's causing this issue with me. And then clients the same way too. It's not pretty and it's not fun, but I can't say anything that I've completely done has been a failure or hasn't worked. It's just maybe I've needed to take a different angle to it or
I
go
suppose
in
a
a different
better way
direction.
of asking the question might be maybe a bit more of a significant issue. So, because we can have reactions to small things, the emotion's valid, but the reaction to that thing may not necessarily be correct, even though, you have to deal with the emotion. Whereas something maybe a bit more traumatic
Yeah.
might take a bit more time or might take some additional techniques. Any thoughts there?
Yeah. So my clients, and I preface this to say, I'm not a licensed medical therapist. I do this on a spiritual side. So when we're talking with the inner child, I'm not dealing with big traumas. I'm not dealing with sexual abuse, high emotional abuse, or physical abuse. That's something they want to go through a process and go through a whole different training for that. Um, I'm working with people that are on an everyday wounds basis, and they want to stop having these wounds affect their daily processes. So yes, if I were to come across a client that says, oh, and something traumatic was really brought up, we would have to end the session and I would have to refer them out because I'm not comfortable and trained to obviously go down that route. So we're talking about smaller wounds, things that happened daily basis that are subconsciously, but they didn't put this big trauma into us that have completely disassociate our nervous system, and we're having to rebuild from that. Does that make sense?
I'm thinking back to your
Yeah.
when you're a kid and someone says they don't want to be your friend anymore. That's the kind of example that we're talking
Yeah.
about.
Okay.
Which I actually think is a good one because I think a lot of people have been through that, whether they remember it or not. But
Yeah.
have you got any examples that you're proud of where you've helped someone?
Man, we'll see. I have brought it's a good one. I have a previous client that was going through some things and they couldn't figure out why they were not able to say no to while they were putting so much stuff on their plate over and over and over and over again. And they couldn't say no. And I was like, where is this coming from? They're like, I don't know where it's coming from. I'm strong, like a very strong, confident businesswoman could, I mean, has had multiple children, like was able to keep everything flowing. She's like, for some reason, I just can't tell certain, some things no. So we started going back through the process of it and it just tied into an inner child wound where she couldn't tell one of her parents no. Because every time she did, her parents were, it was almost, I want to say a narcissistic thing to it, but they would switch it around and make them feel guilty and bad about it. So every time they would have to, the certain personality type that would come across in their career in their future, they would find out they couldn't tie that. They couldn't say no to it. They couldn't stand their ground in it. And so once we started working to release all of that and made them understand the reason why their parent probably acted that way was because of their own inner child healing and generational stuff that was going on. And once they were able to do that and start to release that, they were able to start setting better boundaries and starting to better come up with better solutions to the problems they were having with the people. Basically able to have their voice and be authentic and to have those boundaries with certain types of personalities that we're on. Yeah. So that's a kind
Okay.
of a example. Yeah. I don't like to go into too much deep stuff because my clients do listen to my podcast sometimes and I will be like, oh, you're talking about me. So the confidentiality, but I could, yeah,
Yeah, we
that's
don't
it.
have to mention specifics, but
Yeah.
it did occur to me that I have sort of presupposed that people are in the position where they know it's happening. So have you got any thoughts about, let's say, the person who maybe they're not too sure whether they have self-worth issues or, they're not 100% clear on it. What would you say to that person?
I think it's where we have what are you tying your confidence to? What are you tying your things to? A lot of times we're tying our label. When you look at yourself and you try to describe yourself to someone, what comes up is that I'm a father, I'm a mother, I'm a business owner, I'm this, I'm that, I'm that. I make this amount of money, or I have drive this type of car, or I live in this type of house, or I don't have these things. A lack of. What is that? To me, that is what you're putting your confidence of yourself in. Self-worth, when yourself have extreme self-worth, is when you are, it doesn't matter how if you tie all this stuff. If you're not a mother, or you're not a father, or you're not a business owner, or you don't have a big job, or you're the fry cook at McDonald's, which is nothing wrong with that. And, you're not tying your worth to that. You're tying your worth to your actual the love inside of yourself and who you're truly your characteristics of your internal being is. And so it's a huge diving process that you have to do. And so someone that says, I don't have self-worth issues, that's amazing. But I challenge you because we all kind of go through this in our life, I think at one point or another, because we're told through societies, told through our parents, told through all, our influences of who we are and what we're supposed to be. And if we're not taught that we are not that, we are more of a divine being, like we're a being. And it doesn't matter if we lose every single thing or if we're whatever, we're still worthy. We're still worthy of the love and safety and respect, no matter what we've done. And so I think it's kind of taking a really solid look at what you define yourself as. And a lot of people, I say most people do define themselves by their career, by their possessions, by their relationships, and by other things like that.
Let's say someone did say to you, "Oh, like, what do you do?" or something like that, and you wanted to define yourself in a positive way. What do you say to that question?
Well, I mean, what do I do? I help people, guide people through their inner child issues. I can go to that path. But then when I respond to somebody, I'm like, tell me about yourself. And so most of the time when people that'll tell me immediately, when you say, tell me about yourself, they'll start down, this is what I do. This is and US the same way. We're very tied to our careers. And they'll start with that, especially if you go to networking events. Instead of telling me about yourself, well, I'm a kind person, or I love to read, or I love to do this, I love to do that, activities wise. You're not saying I'm a reader. You're not defining yourself. You're saying I love to do that. And that's part of your being because you can be that. Whereas when we say, hi, I'm an attorney. What do you do? I mean, that's not telling me who you are or what makes you spark. What completely lights somebody up is what I want to hear back in return. I mean, I don't care what they do, honestly. If I need something that's cool, and I may reference that back in the back of my head. Oh, okay. Well, they're a plumber. I might need a plumber, just say a plumber in the future. But then I want to get to know the actual being and who they are. And so think about that when you're having conversations with people, audience. It's like, what questions are you asking? Hi, I'm Alicia. It's nice to meet you. Tell me about yourself. Imagine somebody come up and saying to that, or hi, what do you do? Then you're like, well, all you want to know is how successful I am. And nobody wants to put their self-worth on their success. I mean, they may strive to do things and to find themselves by their success, but nobody wants to put their self as their failure or success, because we fail and succeed, if you don't call it failure, every single day. So why would you tie yourself to that? Because that's floating up and down. You're a solid being with solid things inside yourself. We're not just floating things up and back and forth.
Okay, it's good stuff to think about. I think I might have to regulate my behavior a little bit, but I do think it's
No
worthwhile.
judgment here, but yeah.
Um, for people who would like to follow you or hire you, where do they go?
My website's probably the best place, and I'll spell it out. It's ALICIAFARRICIELLI.com. There's a button on the top that says book a call. You can book a free 1 hour consultation with me. And we'll sit down, we'll talk about whatever your goals are and your needs, and I'm going to give you something to walk away with. If you're not ready to book that call, there's a free inner child workshop that you can download. You can just get on the website too. It'll say free inner child workshop. And then if you want to reach out to me, you can contact me through there. And of course, I'm on most of the social medias except for X or Twitter. I just haven't spent the time to get to know that profile or platform very lately. So
Okay. Well, I would imagine since you're about self-worth and let's say positivity, my interpretation, positivity, I think you're cool to stay off X and Twitter. I think that might be a good thing, but that's
yeah, I don't have the time for that, to be honest.
and, is there anything that I should have asked you about today?
I think we covered a lot. Just would love for people to know that you do have that true self-worth, and to go find that, and start with the inner child work if you find there's something that you're interested in. And I'm absolutely happy to help walk anybody through that.
Okay. And Alicia, do you have any closing thoughts for the episode?
Yeah. Again, figure out what you're tying your self-worth to, and figure out why you're doing that. And then go in and genuinely find out what are your wants and desires and who you truly are. Who were you when you were 3 or 4? That's really who you are.
Alicia, thank you for being a great guest today.
Thank you.